Hi guys. Tonight we settle into the deep cold together, and you let your imagination drift toward a world that feels both familiar and impossibly distant. You breathe in, and the air around you seems to sharpen. It feels like stepping through a thin veil into a night lit only by starlight that glints off ice older than every story you have ever heard. You probably will not survive this, at least not without a very warm coat and a sense of humor, because the Ice Age winter is not the kind of winter you post pictures of. It is the kind that steals heat from your bones even when you think you are prepared. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. If you feel like sharing, let me know your location and your local time. Now, dim the lights, and you begin walking into a night that feels too quiet for comfort. The sort of quiet that makes you wonder if the world has momentarily forgotten how to breathe. You stand on a frozen plain that stretches out so far that you cannot tell where land becomes sky. The first brush of winter hits your cheeks with a soft sting, like the cold testing you, noticing you, trying to decide whether you belong here. You pull your shoulders up instinctively, feeling tiny flakes tap your eyelashes, and you catch the faint scent of distant smoke from a camp you have not yet reached. Your boots sink into the crunchy surface that has been packed down by countless seasons of snowfall, each layer telling a story of storms that once buried entire valleys. Historians still argue whether this early winter night would have been as brutally cold as we imagine, or if some regions offered milder, more survivable pockets of warmth. You feel your breath hanging in the air as tiny crystals, reminding you that even exhaled warmth becomes part of the landscape. As you walk, your footsteps feel louder than they should, echoing across a vast openness that seems to have no walls. You admire the stars. They look sharper than the ones you see from your own window, as if the frozen air acts like a lens. A mainstream historical fact floats into your mind. Global sea levels during the last ice age were more than 100 meters lower than today, because so much water was locked inside enormous glaciers. You picture that water, now frozen hard and towering like silent giants somewhere in the distance, shaping the world beneath your feet in ways you do not fully understand yet. A soft wind moves across the plain and tugs at your clothes with a delicate but insistent pull. There is a hint of something unexpected in the air, a quirky detail seldom mentioned. Microscopic ice crystals can sometimes float like shimmering dust when the temperature drops extremely low, creating a faint sparkle even without direct moonlight. You notice this as tiny glittering points swirl lazily near your knees, almost playful despite the lethal cold. You keep walking, and the night thickens around you. There is no rushing here, no cars, no buzzing lights, only the soft crunch of your steps and the occasional sigh of wind slipping over distant drifts. The world feels paused, as if waiting for you to listen. You pass by an icy ridge, its surface shaped into curves and ripples by seasons of relentless wind. When you run your gloved fingers along it, it feels textured, almost soft, like stone that has not yet decided what it wants to become. You wonder how many winters have touched this same ridge, how many storms have sculpted these shapes. You hear a quiet pop beneath the ice as a hidden layer settles. It does not sound threatening, just alive. The ground is always shifting out here, adjusting, settling, reminding you that even stillness has its own kind of movement. The frozen crust you walk on is made of countless transformations. Snow falling, melting a little in the rare sunlight, refreezing under night skies, compressing into new layers. The Ice Age does not build landscapes quickly. It takes its time, year after year, storm after storm, letting the world form at a slow, patient pace. A distant call echoes faintly in the darkness. It might be an animal, or it could be the wind twisting itself into a sound your mind wants to interpret. The air smells faintly metallic, something icy and sharp, like the scent of fresh snow layered over hidden earth. You imagine early humans stepping onto this same plain, wrapped in heavy furs, carrying fire in their hands and stories in their memories. They would have felt this cold in a way you never truly will. They would have known which way to turn based on the smell of the wind or the pattern of ice crystals on their lashes. You pause for a moment as a hush deeper than silence settles around you. It makes you feel strangely calm, as if the world is setting aside its harshness for just a breath to let you appreciate its immensity. It is easy to see why ancient groups might have felt that winter nights held some kind of wisdom. A fringe tidbit drifts through your mind. Some Ice Age communities believed that certain winter winds carried messages from distant spirits or ancestors, whispering guidance or warnings. You stand still for a heartbeat and listen, wondering whether the breeze curling past your ear has anything to say. You begin to notice how your body is responding. Your fingers feel clumsy, your breath grows tighter, your steps slow as the air drains warmth from you faster than you can replace it. You imagine the challenge faced by every creature that called this world home. Survival here required instinct, endurance, and a deep trust in the rhythm of the land. The cold is not just a force. It is a teacher, a challenger, a sculptor of lives and landscapes. As you keep walking, the horizon shifts. Shadows stretch, colors fade, yet the starlight grows brighter, almost guiding you forward. The icy ground begins to slope gently downward, hinting that you are approaching some kind of ancient path. Maybe it was once a riverbed long before the freeze, or perhaps it is a route known by long vanishing feet. You lean into the slight descent, feeling the cold wrap around your ankles like a curious animal. The night deepens further as you press on. The air grows colder still, enough that even your eyelashes begin to feel stiff. You picture early hunters moving this way, their breath burning in their chests, their minds focused not on wonder but on survival. You wonder how many of them stood exactly here, watching the same stars, feeling the same sting in their lungs. You realize that although the world has changed, the human response to cold has not changed much at all. You take another step, then another, letting the night fold around you. The first breath of the frozen world has welcomed you, and you feel yourself becoming part of its quiet rhythm as you make your way toward the looming presence of glaciers waiting somewhere beyond the next dark rise. You keep walking, letting the cold night settle into your shoulders as the land begins to rise ahead of you. At first it looks like a distant blur, just a slightly darker shape against the dark sky, but as you move closer, the sheer size of it becomes undeniable. The horizon is no longer open. It is blocked, towered over, claimed by a wall of ice so massive that you instinctively stop for a moment, trying to understand the scale of what you are seeing. You tilt your head back, and back again, and you still cannot see the top. The glacier looms above you like a frozen mountain sculpted by time itself. You step forward slowly. Your breath feels thin as you approach, as if the cold thickens the air around the glacier. A faint crackle echoes through the ground, gentle but constant, like a deep, steady heartbeat. It is not alive in the way you are, but it moves, it shifts, it grows and retreats in silent rhythms older than every human civilization combined. Historians still debate whether the edges of these massive ice fronts advanced at steady rates or surged forward unpredictably in sudden icy leaps. Whatever the truth, you can feel the glacier's ancient momentum under your boots. A mainstream historical fact flickers in your thoughts as you take in the scene. The Laurentide ice sheet, one of the greatest glaciers of the last ice age, once covered millions of square kilometers of North America, reaching heights comparable to modern skyscrapers. You picture that immense slab of frozen weight pressing down on the continents, bending the crust, carving valleys, reshaping entire biomes. You imagine the tremendous pressure beneath that ice, strong enough to grind mountains into powdered sediment. A gust of wind curls around the glacier's face. The air rushing off it smells different, clean in a sharp and almost medicinal way, like cold distilled into scent. As you reach the outer edge, the surface reveals itself in intricate textures. Deep vertical grooves cut down its face where meltwater once trickled and refroze. Long sideways scratches mark where ancient stones and boulders were dragged along the glacier's underbelly. You run your fingers along a column of frost and feel how firm and unforgiving it is, colder than anything you have ever touched for more than a moment. Your hand tingles as if the ice is reaching into your skin. A quirky tidbit slips into your mind. Some Ice Age glaciers sometimes emitted eerie musical hums when wind rushed through particular cracks. People who live near these giants occasionally describe them as singing ice. You pause and tilt your head. You think you hear something. A soft, resonant vibration, almost like a low flute from somewhere deep within the frozen wall. The sound is faint, but it feels ancient, almost thoughtful. You step closer to one of the crevasses that runs down from higher up. You cannot see the bottom. A cold draft rises from it, brushing your face in short breaths. The glacier shifts with a low rumble, the kind that settles in your chest. You imagine entire blocks of ice sliding over each other far beneath your feet, squeezing trapped air and ancient snowflakes, forming layers one season at a time. It makes you feel incredibly small, not in a frightening way, but in a respectful way, as if you are standing at the feet of a frozen monument built over tens of thousands of years. As you walk along the glacier's edge, you notice streaks of darker material frozen inside it. Sediment, pebbles, even the occasional large stone carried from who knows where. The glacier is a collector, a traveller, a transporter of worlds. Everything it swallows becomes part of its slow, grinding journey. When the world warms again, these materials will be scattered thousands of kilometers from their origins, reshaping landscapes in quiet, powerful ways. Your footsteps crunch over crusted snow that has been repeatedly pressed and lifted by the shifting ice. Each crunch echoes slightly, bouncing off the frozen wall beside you. The acoustics are strange. Some sounds seem to vanish into the ice as if swallowed. Others bounce back sharper than expected, ringing in your ears. You imagine early humans walking alongside these same walls with torches flickering in their hands, listening for signs of movement that might warn them of sudden collapses. You find yourself noticing how the glacier glows faintly in the starlight. Ice this old and this dense does not glint the way fresh snow does. Instead, it holds light, absorbing it into layers and letting only the softest reflections return to your eyes. It makes the glacier look like a sleeping creature wrapped in a dull blue aura. The air near the glacier grows colder the longer you linger. You feel it in your chest, in your fingertips, even in the tip of your nose. The temperature drops enough to make your eyelashes stiff again. You exhale, and your breath forms a thick cloud that drifts toward the ice before dissolving into the night. You continue walking along the glacier and begin to notice small melt channels frozen in place, as if time stopped while streams were still flowing. Their smooth curves run down the glacier's side like delicate sculptures carved by a patient artist. Frost gathers around their edges in feathery patterns that look almost like icy ferns. You think about how loud this place must be when the sun returns in late spring. Meltwater roaring under the glacier, cracking and groaning as large slabs shift and reposition, ice caves collapsing, rivers bursting out from beneath. The glacial world has seasons too, even if this winter one lasts longer than any you have ever known. Another low rumble rolls beneath your feet. You pause. The glacier is not threatening you. It is simply living its slow, heavy life. You place your palm against its surface. The cold sinks quickly into your skin. You feel the pulse of ancient snow, compressed into clear blue ice long before humans built their first shelters. The land around you is shaped by this giant. Valleys carved, hills formed, rivers redirected. Even the soil far from here carries traces of glacial travel. Walking beside it feels like reading a long, slow chapter of Earth's autobiography, written in frozen strokes across continents. You take one last look at the towering wall above you, letting its vastness settle into your mind. Then you turn, ready to continue your journey deeper into the Ice Age world, where your own breath may soon freeze into crystals as the night grows even colder ahead. You move away from the glacier's looming face, feeling the cold releasing you just enough for your body to function again. The land opens before you like an untouched canvas of white and bluish grey. With every step, you breathe in air so cold that it feels thick, almost textured, as if you could reach out and grab a handful of it. Your breath turns immediately to tiny crystals, drifting away in delicate shivers that sparkle briefly before fading into the dark. You watch them float, marveling at how even your exhale becomes a brief part of the Ice Age landscape. You draw a slow breath, noticing how the frigid air stings the back of your throat. It sharpens your senses. It rushes into your lungs like a cold river, and you feel a tiny ache each time you inhale. Winter here does not merely chill you, it invades you. Every breath is a negotiation between warmth and the biting cold. Historians still discuss whether Ice Age temperatures were consistently brutal or if they fluctuated in unpredictable waves that tested early humans without warning. You imagine what it must have felt like waking to mornings where the air froze nose hairs instantly, while other mornings offered a short-lived softness before the cold returned with renewed force. Ahead of you, the snow stretches unbroken, a wide plain shimmering faintly as a thin breeze dances across it. The snow underfoot has a distinct sound. It does not crunch the way modern snow does. Instead, it compresses with a sharp, crystalline snap, like you are stepping on brittle glass. That sound repeats again and again, a steady rhythm that accompanies your steps. A mainstream historical fact comes to mind as you continue forward. During the coldest glacial periods, average global temperatures were roughly 6 degrees Celsius lower than today, a seemingly small change that transformed entire continents into harsh, frozen environments. That difference feels enormous now, pressing down on you with every breath. You tug your cloak tighter around your shoulders and keep moving as the cold squeezes your lungs in quiet insistence. Your breath hangs so visibly in the air that it casts faint shadows in the dim starlight. You watch one cloud drift aside and feel a strange sense of companionship with each exhale, as if your body is producing tiny fading ghosts that glide away silently across the night. The snow beneath you appears smooth, but you quickly learn it hides stories. You spot a ridge in the snow that looks oddly shaped. When you nudge it with your toe, you realize it is the frozen outline of an ancient animal track preserved in packed frost. The print is large, round, and deep, with sharp edges that have not eroded. You crouch down and brush away soft powder around it. The shape becomes clearer, possibly a giant deer, or something heavier. The Ice Age had no shortage of impressive animals. A quirky tidbit surfaces in your thoughts. Some ancient species of ground sloth, far larger than modern ones, roamed cold regions and left massive footprints that could be mistaken for those of mythical creatures by anyone stumbling upon them centuries later. The air here carries a particular scent, almost absent in modern winters. It smells like clean emptiness, the kind of crispness you only get when the air contains almost no moisture. It reminds you of frozen metal, faintly sharp and sterile. When you inhale deeply, the inside of your nose tingles, and you feel a flicker of something that might be nostalgia or might be awe. As you stand, a sudden gust lifts loose crystals from the ground. They swirl around your legs in tiny silver spirals, creating a soft hissing sound. For a moment, the world feels alive with moving frost. You lift your hand, and some crystals land on your glove, sparkling like tiny jewels before melting from the heat of your skin. You blink against the cold, as the wind quiets and the crystals settle back onto the plain. Walking onward, you start to notice how the land dips and rises beneath the snow cover. What looks like a smooth expanse actually hides uneven terrain shaped by ancient glacial movements. You step over small mounds and shallow hollows, feeling each change in elevation through your boots. The ground feels more solid here, packed tight by centuries of compression. When you step into a low area, the temperature drops noticeably. Cold air sinks into the dips, pooling like still water. You shiver slightly, pulling your arms tight. You picture early travelers navigating these same subtle contours. Without modern maps or satellite imagery, they relied on instinct, memory, and visual clues. They understood that hollows often hid colder air or concealed dangerous thin ice. Ridges offered visibility but left them exposed to harsh winds. Survival required constant attention. Nothing could be ignored. Your own breath continues to form thick clouds, each one drifting away like a soft white veil. You start to notice how long the crystals linger in the air before disappearing. This is because the humidity is so low that your breath does not dissolve quickly. It hangs, suspended, almost sculptural. You imagine early humans watching their breath behave the same way, and wondering whether it meant the spirits were near, or whether it simply meant the night was too cold for comfort. The stars above you shine with piercing brightness. You spot constellations you recognize and others that look slightly off, their positions shifted because this is a world not yet reshaped by millennia of subtle movements. There is something calming about these stars, even as the cold numbs your fingertips. They make the night feel watchful rather than lonely. You exhale again, and the crystals drift slowly forward. In the stillness, you can hear them settling onto your coat with tiny, barely audible ticks, like frost whispering secrets. You think about how fragile the human body is in conditions like this. No matter how strong or determined, warmth bleeds away one breath at a time. You instinctively tuck your chin down into your collar. You keep walking until you reach a patch of snow that sparkles more intensely than the rest. You crouch to examine it. Tiny crystals stand upright on the surface, forming delicate branching shapes. The pattern is almost floral. This phenomenon, known as hoarfrost, grows when ice forms directly out of moisture in the air, bypassing liquid entirely. These crystalline structures grow best on clear nights like this, when temperature differences between the snow surface and the air create perfect conditions for delicate, frost-like blossoms. You touch one branch carefully. It crumbles instantly into glittering dust. Its fragility makes you smile softly, a quiet appreciation of beauty thriving even in such a harsh world. A distant noise carries across the plain. It is low, almost surprising in the silence, like a rumbling cough from the earth itself. Perhaps ice cracking, perhaps an animal moving far off. The sound is impossible to pinpoint. It ripples across the land before fading into the night. You straighten slowly, scanning the horizon. Nothing moves, nothing changes. But the sound lingers in your mind, reminding you that winter silence is never truly silent. You breathe again, and fresh crystals appear, swirling briefly before dispersing. The cold seems to shape your body's warmth into art, one breath at a time. You move forward, noticing how your pace has slowed. The cold persuades you to conserve energy. Your breaths become deeper, more deliberate, as if you somehow need to negotiate with the air to keep going. You imagine how early humans mastered this rhythm, learning to breathe in ways that used less warmth, less energy, less moisture. The snow ahead rises into a gentle slope. You climb it, feeling the cold press against your legs. At the top, you pause. The land spreads out beneath you in a wide, frosted vista. The stars reflect faintly on the snow, creating the illusion of a sky mirrored on the ground. For a moment, you feel suspended between two worlds, one above and one below, each glittering in silence. You watch your breath drift into the night again. This time you let it float away without moving. You stand still, letting the cold nibble at your fingertips. You think of ancient hunters pausing just like this, measuring the wind, sensing distant movement, and planning where to step next. A thin film of frost forms on your eyebrows. Your eyelashes feel heavier. Your nose prickles. Yet the beauty of the moment holds you there, unwilling to move. This frozen breath of the ice age wraps around you gently, almost tenderly, even while it tries to claim your warmth. Finally, you take one last look at the shimmering plain and continue forward, letting your breath form new crystals as you journey deeper into the long winter night of an ancient world. You continue across the snowy plain, and soon the landscape begins to rise again in slow, sweeping mounds that look soft from afar but feel hard and crusted beneath your boots. The cold has settled deeper into your clothes, making each movement feel heavier. As you climb the gentle slope, you notice how the snow ahead looks different. It glows faintly under the starlight, not with sparkle this time, but with a muted, endless whiteness. You crest the rise, and then you see it fully, a wide field of snow that never melts. It stretches across the horizon like a frozen ocean, its surface unbroken and ancient. You step forward, feeling the crunch of tightly packed layers that have endured countless winters. Snow like this is not fresh. It is the result of seasons folding over one another, each storm adding a thin veil, each rare thaw sinking into deeper layers before freezing again. What looks like soft powder from a distance is actually a dense blanket that has pressed down over centuries. In some places, this layered mass becomes the foundation of glaciers themselves, and the difference between the snow you walk on and the towering ice walls you saw earlier is simply time and pressure. You crouch and scoop a handful of the surface snow. It feels coarse, almost like crushed salt. When you squeeze it, it holds its shape briefly before crumbling through your fingers. This is firn, a stage between snow and glacial ice. Researchers often mention that firn can store atmospheric traces for thousands of years, locking tiny bubbles of ancient air inside each compressed layer. You look at the handful of granules and imagine that somewhere deep below, hidden pockets of air still hold a faint breath from long-vanished climates. The field ahead seems completely flat until you begin walking across it. Then you feel the subtle undulations beneath the heavy snow. Beneath this pale sheet lies a world reshaped by glacial movement. Hidden ridges, sunken channels, buried hills. The snow masks everything, giving the illusion of calm, but you can sense the complex structure beneath your feet. A cold gust sweeps across the open field, carrying a dry hush with it. The sound is different here. It does not bounce or echo the way it did near the glacier. Instead, it moves quietly across the surface, as if the snow absorbs noise. You breathe out, and even your breath cloud feels subdued, fading more quickly into the stillness. Despite the silence, this landscape was once alive with movement. Long ago, herds of Ice Age animals trudged across these heavy snowfields, leaving deep paths that remain visible for weeks. Hunters followed these paths with patience and careful steps, learning to read the direction and age of each track. You imagine one such hunter pausing exactly where you stand now, looking out across the same vast whiteness, planning the next move. A curious piece of knowledge crosses your mind. Some regions during the last glacial period had snowfall patterns that created layers several meters deep each year. These layers would compress so fully that the fields became natural archives of past winters. You picture thin bands forming year after year, each one a slightly different shade depending on the storms, the winds, even distant volcanic eruptions that dusted the snow with faint ash. These layers are still studied today to understand how the world once breathed through its seasons. As you walk, you realize that the snow underfoot has changed again. The surface softens slightly. Your boots sink deeper with each step, creating small mounds at your heels. You can feel the difference immediately. This patch has not been compacted by weeks of wind and cold. Maybe it is newly fallen. Maybe it is less exposed. The air around it feels slightly cooler, as if this softer snow releases its chill more easily. You lift your hand and let a few flakes fall onto your glove. They are not fresh flakes from the sky, but tiny grains lifted by the breeze, glittering like powdered glass. They melt instantly on your skin. That quick disappearance reminds you of how fiercely this winter devours warmth. Even the smallest bit of heat vanishes without mercy. You continue on, noticing strange patterns forming on the surface. In some places, the snow has been sculpted into delicate ripples that resemble waves on a shallow beach. These formations, often shaped by steady wind, can tell experienced travelers which direction storms tend to blow from. You crouch and run your fingers along one crest. The surface feels smooth and glassy. If you press harder, it cracks with a crisp snap. As your steps carry you deeper into the endless whiteness, you begin to sense how disorienting this landscape can be. With no trees, no rocks, no landmarks, everything looks the same in every direction. It would be easy to wander in circles without realizing it. Early humans sometimes tied bits of colored cord or left bundles of sticks behind them when crossing long snowfields, creating simple markers so they would know if they had looped back upon themselves. You imagine how unsettling it must have been to travel across such sameness with nothing but instinct to guide you. The sky above remains a deep, cold blue despite the stars. A thin haze forms along the horizon, almost invisible until you squint. That faint haze is made of tiny ice crystals suspended in the air, forming what some researchers describe as a light pillar effect when conditions are perfect. You look closely, hoping to spot one of these shimmering columns. Not tonight. The air is too still. Ahead, you spot something odd, a long, narrow depression running across the snow. At first you think it might be an animal trail, but the shape is too straight. You kneel beside it and brush away loose powder. Beneath the top layer is a subtle glide groove, perhaps an ancient ice shelf once dragged across this very spot. Or maybe this channel was shaped by meltwater during a brief warm spell thousands of years ago. Even now, long after the event, the mark remains, preserved like a whisper from an earlier season. A few steps later, you notice darker streaks breaking the surface of the snow. You bend down and pick up a small piece. It is a tiny fragment of wind-blown sediment, carried from some faraway place. Wind during the Ice Age was capable of lifting fine particles and scattering them across great distances. Some regions even developed loess landscapes, thick blankets of wind-deposited silt that remain fertile soil today. You let the tiny particle fall from your glove, wondering how many hundreds of kilometers it traveled before landing here. A question drifts into your thoughts as you walk. What did early people think when they looked across snowfields like this? Did they see danger, or opportunity, or quiet beauty? Some anthropologists have suggested that long winters shaped certain spiritual beliefs, encouraging people to see the landscape as alive, watching, and responsive. You walk a little slower, sensing how easy it would be to imagine the snow itself listening. Far ahead, you notice a slight shimmer in the air. You move closer and realize it is caused by warm breath rising from a cluster of small hollows. The snow has collapsed over pockets of buried vegetation, and the tiny bit of warmth still escaping creates subtle distortions in the air. You kneel and peer into one hollow. Inside, you see the frozen remains of grass, perfectly preserved, its blades stiff and white. Your steps carry you onward until you reach a slight rise at the far edge of the snowfield. When you climb it, the landscape beyond changes again. The snow slopes downward sharply, tumbling into deeper drifts that ripple like frozen dunes. The field behind you looks flat and peaceful, but ahead lies a world of soft mounds and hidden dips that your feet will soon have to navigate. You take one last look at the snowfield that never melts. It is both still and constantly transforming, a bridge between sky and earth, a record of winters stacked endlessly on top of one another. You continue onward, ready to let the Ice Age reveal the next part of its cold, quiet story. You step away from the endless, unmoving snowfield and feel the terrain shift beneath your boots once more. At first, the ground seems stable, but then a subtle tremor of air brushes against your face, and you recognize the presence of something the Ice Age never failed to deliver. Wind, not a gentle breeze, not the playful drifting that lifted crystals earlier. This is different. This wind has a personality, an edge, a persistent force that feels almost alive. You brace yourself automatically as it sweeps across the plain, curling around your legs like a cold animal testing your resolve. The first blast steals your breath for a moment. It slashes sideways across your cheeks, and you feel the sting immediately, sharp enough to make your eyes water. You blink quickly, wiping the moisture away before it freezes. Then another gust follows, stronger, deeper, as if the world is inhaling and exhaling in giant icy pulses. You lean into it, squinting at the darkness ahead as your cloak flutters violently behind you. There is sound in this wind, not just howling but a layered voice, shifting pitch as it moves over ridges, snow mounds and distant ice formations. The sound rises and falls like a low song, eerie and rhythmic. Some environmental studies mention that winds sweeping across glacial landscapes could carry harmonic tones when funneled through natural channels of ice and rock. You listen carefully, and under the roar you detect faint whistling notes, almost melodic, drifting like a hidden message inside the storm. Every step now requires intention. The wind presses against you with steady insistence, forcing you to lean forward. The cold it carries is astonishing. It feels sharper than anything you have encountered so far, as if the wind has been sharpened by miles of icy travel. Your eyelashes collect fine frost as you walk. Even blinking becomes slower, heavier, as if the cold is stealing speed from your movements. A biting gust rattles through a patch of crusted snow, sending tiny fragments skittering across the surface like shards of glass. You watch them race past your feet, tapping lightly against your boots. The sound is delicate yet crisp, a rapid pattering that lasts only a moment before the wind steals the fragments again. Another wide sweep of air rises behind you and pushes hard. You stagger one step, catch yourself, and keep going. If the glacier was a silent giant, and the snowfield a quiet landscape of stillness, then the wind is a restless companion, demanding your attention at every moment. It feels unpredictable, shifting directions as if deciding whether to guide you or challenge you. You think of the people who lived through these winters without modern gear. Stories from archaeological research often highlight the difficulty of moving across open ground when winds could reach speeds capable of knocking adults and children off balance. Some Ice Age groups developed particular stances for walking against wind, leaning at specific angles to conserve energy and avoid injury. You try copying that posture now, angling your body slightly, planting your feet more firmly. It helps. A little. The cold air whistles past your ears, creating high, ringing tones that come and go without rhythm. You tuck your hands into your sleeves, feeling the numbness creep slowly into your fingers. Breathing deeply becomes a luxury. You can take only shallow breaths without feeling your lungs tighten. The air feels stripped of moisture, stripped of kindness, leaving only sharpness behind. As another gust rises, it brings with it fine powdered snow that lifts into swirling spirals. These little whirlwinds dance across the surface, twisting like pale snakes before collapsing back into the drift. You watch one swirl around your legs before dissolving, leaving behind tiny flashes of white light under the stars. The effect is mesmerizing, almost hypnotic. You take one step, then another, listening to the roar of wind-shifting pitch as the land changes under your feet. A hollow somewhere ahead catches the wind at just the right angle, producing a low, vibrating hum that reminds you of a distant horn. Researchers sometimes describe how certain Ice Age valleys acted like enormous wind instruments when storms passed through. You pause, hearing that resonance, almost expecting the sound to repeat. It does. A long, trembling tone that seems to rise from the snow itself. Your breath forms short bursts of fog, instantly torn apart by the passing air. You no longer see your exhale drift peacefully away. Instead, it vanishes the moment it leaves your lips, shredded into nothingness. The disappearance feels symbolic, as if the wind refuses to let anything linger here. You pull your cloak closer and continue onward, scanning the horizon for landmarks. The wind makes everything harder to see. Snow lifts in sheets, forming sudden curtains that hide the path ahead. You squint through them, trying to make sense of shifting shapes. Shadows seem to move, and the landscape feels alive with motion, even though nothing truly walks there. A faint memory crosses your mind. Early human groups sometimes placed their camps behind natural windbreaks like massive boulders, cliff edges, or stands of hardy shrubs. Even a shallow ridge could offer protection against winds that drained body heat dangerously fast. Without such shelter, people risked frostbite or exhaustion long before dawn. You wish for such a windbreak now. Even a simple rise of land would help. After several more steps, the ground slopes downward. The wind grows louder here, rushing over the crest behind you and gathering speed. It is almost a physical push. You bend your knees for stability and descend carefully. The snow below looks untouched, smooth and reflective, but the moment you step into the dip you feel the difference. The wind drops dramatically. It does not disappear, but it softens, losing its bite. The dip acts like a shallow bowl, shielding you from the direct assault. You exhale, grateful for the momentary peace. You inhale again, deeper this time. Your lungs relax slightly. You can feel the warmth returning to your fingertips, just enough to wiggle them freely again. The silence in this sheltered space feels heavy, as if the world has finally taken a breath of its own. You look up at the sky. The stars appear clearer here. The constellations look like they are leaning closer, observing your brief refuge. You sit on a firm patch of snow and let your shoulders drop, feeling the strain leave your muscles. The wind continues to roar above the ridge, but it sounds distant now, like a storm heard through thick walls. You close your eyes for a moment, listening to the muffled world around you. While you rest, you recall that many early myths and legends from cold regions describe winds as spirits or voices traveling across the world, delivering messages or warnings. Some groups believed certain winds meant coming storms or shifts in the hunt. You imagine what it must have felt like to sleep on nights when the wind howled endlessly, rattling the outer walls of shelters made of hide and bone. When you open your eyes again, you notice small streams of loose snow pouring down the slope around you, carried by the lingering traces of swirling air. They move like tiny fog-like streams, drifting sideways across the ground. You brush some away from your knee and stand again, ready to continue. You climb out of the sheltered dip, bracing yourself for the wind to return. The moment your head rises above the ridge, the cold strikes you again, fierce and unapologetic. It pushes at your chest, tugging at your cloak. You grit your teeth and force your body forward into the relentless blast. The wind whistles fiercely now, as if measuring your determination. With every step you take, the wind seems to change its voice. It shifts from a scream to a whisper, then to a rolling growl that vibrates against your skin. It sweeps loose snow into long ribbons that trail across the ground. It sinks its icy fingers into your hair. It chills the breath before it even has time to leave your lungs. And yet, as harsh as it is, there is something strangely exhilarating about it. It makes the world feel larger, wilder, more alive. You sense how this wind shaped lives and landscapes alike. It carved dunes of snow. It smoothed ice into glassy plains. It tested creatures, pushed them, forged endurance in everything that survived here. You press on, letting the roaring air become part of the rhythm of your journey. Somewhere ahead lies a campfire, a hunt, a shelter of bone. But for now, it is just you and the wind, locked in a cold conversation that stretches across the ancient night. You fight your way past the last stubborn push of the wind until the landscape softens again, smoothing into a quieter stretch of frozen ground. The night deepens around you, and with it comes a different kind of cold, not the sharp, slicing gusts you just endured, but a steady, sinking frost that wraps itself around everything and refuses to let go. Your breath spills slowly into the air, turning to a pale cloud that drifts upward before it disappears into the dark. Ahead, you spot a faint glow flickering low to the ground, small and unsteady, like a fire trying its best to survive in a world that feels too cold for flame. You move toward it, drawn by instinct and longing. As you get closer, the flicker becomes clearer. A tiny campfire sits at the center of a shallow hollow, shielded from the worst of the wind by cleverly stacked slabs of mammoth bone. The firelight trembles against the smooth curves of the bones, making them look alive in their own quiet way. You step into the hollow, and the temperature changes instantly, as if you have crossed an invisible boundary. The cold is still there, but the sting eases, replaced by a thin envelope of warmth rising from the flames. The smell reaches you first, a mix of burning fat, smoke, and the faint earthy scent of dried moss used as kindling. You crouch beside the fire and stretch out your hands. letting the heat crawl back into your fingers slowly, almost shyly. The warmth feels fragile. You treat it carefully, as if it might slip away if you reach too fast. Above the fire, a small rack supports strips of drying meat. You watch them sway gently in the rising heat. Early humans often used fat-rich cuts to keep flames alive during brutal winters. Their fires needed to be both heat and sustenance, a dual resource that meant survival in the dark months. You imagine families gathering around a fire like this, adding precious scraps of fuel, guarding each ember as if it were treasure. A detail from archaeological research drifts into your thoughts. Charred remains found in ancient hearths show that people used not only wood, but also dung, bone marrow, even resin from frozen trees to keep their fires alive. Everything burned differently, producing its own smell, its own color of flame, its own mood. You glance at the fire now. The flames burn low and yellow, likely fueled by something rich in oil. You settle closer, feeling the warmth seep slowly through your layered clothing. The glow softens the hard lines of the world around you. Shadows dance over the snow, shifting like silent figures moving just at the edge of vision. The fire makes the hollow feel intimate, almost welcoming. For the first time since you stepped into this Ice Age world, you feel a hint of comfort. Your eyes drift toward a small pouch lying near the bones. You pick it up and find powdered charcoal mixed with ground berries. Some Ice Age groups used blends like this to create protective markings on their skin during winter ceremonies. The mixture helped block cold winds on exposed cheeks and foreheads, and some evidence suggests that certain pigments offered antimicrobial benefits. You brush a bit between your fingers. It feels gritty and slightly sticky. You imagine someone applying it before night hunts or during long periods of travel, each mark carrying meaning beyond simple warmth. You lower the pouch and turn your attention back to the fire. Sparks rise occasionally, swirling higher in the warm air before vanishing. You watch them for a long moment, mesmerized by their brief dance. The fire pops, a small burst of sound that echoes faintly in the hollow. It feels like an exhale, the fire releasing a tiny bit of trapped tension. Sitting here, you begin to understand how vital this small circle of light would have been. Not just for heat, but for spirit. Without fire, nights like this could crush even the strongest resolve. With it, you gain a sense of place, a center, a reason to sit still for a while. You lean back slightly, letting the firelight warm your face. Questions from modern research drift into your mind as you watch the flames. Some scholars continue to discuss how often Ice Age groups gathered in large camps versus small family clusters. Others point to evidence of seasonal gatherings where different groups met to share food, tools, and stories before dispersing again. Here, beside the fire, you can almost imagine the quiet conversations that might have taken place. Voices low, laughter occasional, stories weaving through the night while the wind grumbled somewhere far beyond. A thin plume of smoke rises from the fire, curling lazily upward before the wind catches it and tugs it sideways. You follow its path and notice the faint shimmer of heat moving above the flames. The shimmer bends the light, creating a wavering distortion that reminds you of memories seen through half-closed eyes. You blink slowly. The warmth makes you just a bit sleepy, but you stay alert, listening to the subtle sounds around you. Somewhere beyond the hollow, something cracks. A distant snap of ice or a shifting tree trunk hidden under frost. It is not a threat, just the land rearranging itself in the cold. The fire crackles quietly in response, as if acknowledging the noise. You glance up to see the stars shimmering above, softened slightly by the faint smoke drifting past. You rub your hands together and stretch your fingers out again. The heat seeps deeper this time, spreading through your palms and wrists. You imagine early humans doing the same thing, trying to coax warmth back into hands stiff from carrying tools, weapons, or children. You picture them rubbing their palms briskly, teasing warmth back into aching joints before reaching for a piece of dried meat. A warm glow hits your face as the fire flares up for a moment. You lean forward, absorbing the brief surge of heat. You notice how the flames shape themselves around the bone supports, licking upward in narrow ribbons. The bones act as both windbreak and reflector, bouncing warmth back into the hollow. Whoever built this fire knew exactly how to make flame and shelter work together. You shift to another patch of snow, finding a spot where the ground has softened slightly from the heat. You lower yourself and rest your elbows on your knees, staring into the flames. The firelight paints the world in warm tones, turning the surrounding snow a pale gold. You listen to the faint rustling of the wind outside the hollow. It sounds irritated, almost sulking. It wants to enter, to claim every inch of the landscape. But the bones and fire defy it with gentle persistence. The contrast feels comforting, like being wrapped in a soft blanket while storms rage outside. Your thoughts drift to another curious detail. In some Ice Age sites, archaeologists have found stones arranged around hearths, in patterns that may have served as seating or even simple ritual spaces. The placement suggests more than practicality. It hints at gatherings, shared meals, shared stories, and little pockets of community carved out in the harshest environments. The fire was not just heat, it was home. You extend your hands one more time before rising to your feet. The warmth lingers on your palms even after you pull them back, a small gift you carry as you prepare to return to the cold. You brush snow from your clothes and take a final grateful look at the flickering flame. The hollow feels peaceful, but your journey continues. Somewhere beyond the ridge lies the next challenge of this frozen world. You step out of the hollow, letting the fire's glow fade behind you. The wind greets you again, colder than before, as if reminding you that comfort here is borrowed, never given freely. You pull your cloak close and walk on, leaving the tiny circle of warmth flickering alone under the ancient sky. You climb slowly out of the protective hollow, your boots sinking into the colder, untouched snow. The warmth from the fire clings faintly to your skin, but the wind wastes no time stealing it away. The air feels sharper now, cleaner in a way that stings your lungs with every breath. You pull your cloak tighter around your shoulders and continue forward, guided by the faint silver glow of starlight brushing across the wide, frozen plain. Soon the land begins to change again, rising into long, rolling ridges shaped by ages of snow and shifting ice. As you crest one of those ridges, you see it, a set of tracks pressed deep into the snow, enormous, round, wider than the span of both your hands spread as far apart as they can reach. They move in a straight, steady line across the ridge, before dipping down into a shadowed hollow ahead. You take a careful step closer, crouching low. The edges of the tracks are sharp, meaning the creature passed not long ago. The snow inside each print has been pushed down so far that the bottom glitters faintly, reflecting bits of ice compacted beneath. You brush your gloved fingers across one print and feel how deep it goes. A creature of immense weight did this. A mammoth. You stand slowly, your heart beating a little faster at the thought. The Ice Age was home to these giants, towering creatures with great curling tusks and shaggy coats thick enough to keep warmth even in nights like this. Crossing paths with one was both gift and danger for early humans. The meat could feed a group for weeks, but the hunt itself demanded patience, courage, and a level of coordination few animals ever required. You follow the tracks for a moment, listening to the quiet. No deep rumble of footsteps, no huff of breath carried on the wind. The mammoth is gone, but its presence lingers in every pressed groove in the snow. You try to imagine what it looked like when alive, lumbering across this ridge with slow, powerful strides. Researchers often mention that mammoths used well-traveled paths across their territories, following routes known across generations. These paths sometimes became highways of the Ice Age, used not only by mammoths but also by early hunters who studied them carefully. As you continue down the ridge, you spot more signs of passage. Here, a bit of frozen dung, half buried in frost. There, a tuft of coarse hair caught on a low, ice-packed shrub. You pick up the hair and roll it between your fingers. It feels rough and wiry, designed to resist the fiercest cold. You imagine early humans storing such hair to weave into cords or insulation for clothing. Nothing from such creatures went to waste. Ahead, the land dips into a wider basin. You step down carefully, using your hands for balance as the slope turns slick with compacted ice. At the bottom you pause, scanning the open space. More tracks. Not just the large ones. Smaller patterns cross the basin too. Cloven prints from ancient reindeer. Paw marks from wolves moving silently across the snow. The basin feels like a crossroads, a place where life converged, where hunters once studied the ground to read the story of an entire day. You step forward slowly, your breath forming soft clouds that drift upward in the stillness. You picture a group of early hunters standing where you stand now, peering at these same kinds of patterns. They would have crouched together, whispering quietly, choosing who would carry the spears and who would circle around to flank the animal. Some anthropologists suggest that these hunts were as much a test of unity as they were a means of survival. Cooperation was everything. A lone hunter would have stood no chance against a beast weighing several tons. The air carries a faint scent now, something earthy and warm, almost like damp hide. You follow it cautiously, listening for sound. Nothing moves, but the scent grows stronger as you approach the far edge of the basin. You crouch beside a low rise of snow and brush it aside, revealing a patch of disturbed ground beneath, a sleeping spot. A mammoth may have rested here earlier in the night, leaving behind the faint warmth of its massive body. You press your palm near the ground and feel only cold now, but the shape is unmistakable, a shallow dip large enough to cradle a creature the size of a boulder. Standing again, you scan the horizon. One of the ridges ahead looks different, darker, taller, with shadows stretching downward like long arms. You realize it is not a ridge. It is a mammoth standing quietly in the dark, a huge, shaggy shape, its fur blending with the night except for the slow sway of its massive head. The tusks catch a glimmer of starlight, curved and pale. You freeze, not out of fear but out of awe. The animal has not noticed you. It stands still as a frost-covered statue, perhaps listening, perhaps resting. You step backwards slowly, careful not to crunch too loudly in the snow. The giant does not move. It stands with that timeless patience that only massive herbivores seem to possess. You watch for another long moment, feeling a deep connection to the ancient world around you. Then the mammoth shifts slightly, exhaling a warm cloud that rises into the cold air. The sound is soft, a deep, steady sigh that carries across the basin. You take one last look at the enormous creature and retreat quietly toward the ridge behind you. Once you reach a safe distance, you allow yourself to breathe again. Encounters like that were rare, even in the Ice Age. Hunters might follow mammoths for hours or days before finding the right moment to strike. Some groups used controlled burns on the tundra to guide these giants toward natural traps or lakes where they moved more slowly. Others relied on carefully timed throws of long spears tipped with stone points sharpened to deadly precision. When you climb the ridge and glance back, the mammoth has already begun to move, lumbering steadily toward a distant line of low shrubs. You watch its silhouette shrink slowly before it blends into the darkness. A rustle of movement catches your ear, pulling your attention away. You turn and spot a cluster of smaller animals navigating the ridge above you. Prehistoric deer, their antlers sharp and narrow, flick their heads nervously as they pick their way through the snow. They pause when they see you, their breath rising in quick silver puffs. After a moment of stillness, they bound away, hooves tapping a rapid rhythm against the icy crust. You watch them go, marveling at how swiftly they vanish into the night. This land may be frozen, but it is not lifeless. Every ridge, every hollow, every patch of wind-sculpted snow holds stories of creatures adjusting, surviving, thriving, in ways that still surprise modern researchers. As you turn back to the path ahead, another thought rises. Some excavations have revealed caches of mammoth bones arranged deliberately, suggesting that early hunters not only used these creatures for food, but also for rituals and shared memory. Certain patterns in bone placements might indicate gratitude, respect, or even spiritual significance. The Ice Age was not simply a story of cold and hunger. It was also a world filled with meaning, shaped by the creatures that lived in it. You step forward again, leaving the basin of tracks behind. The wind shifts slightly, brushing the back of your neck. You take a deep breath and continue on, feeling the ancient rhythm of the hunt echo through the frozen night. You travel onward, guided by the faint grooves of old tracks and the soft rise and fall of the frozen ground. Your legs grow heavier as the cold works deeper into your muscles. The land stretches ahead in long, pale ribbons, and you begin to notice shapes scattered across the horizon. At first, they look like small hills. Then you step closer, and the silhouettes sharpen. These are shelters, not caves, not wooden huts, structures built from the remains of giants, mammoth bone dwellings. You descend toward the closest one, feeling the snow soften under your feet as you reach a shallow basin carved long ago by melting ice. The shelter rises gently from the drift, half buried, half exposed. Enormous ribs form the outer frame, arched upward like the skeleton of a stranded ship. Jawbones sit side by side at the entrance, arranged into a threshold both practical and symbolic. Above everything lies a tightly stretched layer of hides, thick and fur-lined, darkened from smoke and many repairs. You pause at the entrance, running your hand lightly along one curved rib. The bone feels smooth, colder than the air, and astonishingly solid. Archaeologists have long noted how Ice Age builders selected specific bones to create frameworks, often choosing ribs, tusks, and scapulae for their shapes and durability. This dwelling shows that same precision. Every piece has purpose, fitted together in a way that suggests both engineering sense and inherited knowledge passed across many generations. You lift the hide flap and step inside. Warmth hits you immediately, not the intense heat of fire, but the muted, comforting glow of a space protected from the wind. The air smells of smoke, dried meat, animal fat, and the faint musky scent of fur that has been worn through countless winters. Shadows sway across the inner walls as a small coal fire glows red at the center, surrounded by stones that hold and slowly release warmth. You lower yourself onto a pile of soft pelts near the wall. The hides beneath you feel thick and springy, layered for insulation. In this dim interior, you understand why such shelters mattered so deeply. With no forests across much of the Ice Age plains, wood was scarce. Bone and hide became the primary building materials, and clever hands turned them into havens capable of surviving storms that could last for weeks. As your eyes adjust, you notice tools hanging from a lattice woven from sinew, needles carved from bird bones, scrapers shaped from flint, tiny blades with sharp edges that still gleam despite their age. Findings from Paleolithic sites often include toolkits like these, each one a quiet testament to the resourcefulness of early families who carried their homes and survival on their backs. You imagine these tools being used to stitch hides, carve meat, trim furs, and fashion intricate ornaments that held both practical and emotional value. You shift onto your elbows and look around more carefully. In the far corner sits a pile of tusk segments arranged with careful symmetry. They are etched with tiny patterns, lines, spirals, and crosshatches. These markings remind you of the decorations found on Ice Age artifacts, symbols whose meanings remain partly mysterious. Some researchers think they recorded important events. Others believe they represented spiritual visions or seasonal guides. The interpretations vary widely, but all agree such designs were deliberate and meaningful. Near the entrance hangs a string of shells this far inland. You tilt your head, intrigued. The presence of marine shells in inland dwellings has led some specialists to propose long-distance trade networks or seasonal migrations that brought people from the coast deep into the glacial interior. You gently touch one shell. Its surface is smooth and cold, carrying the silent story of someone who traveled far to bring it here. A soft breeze slips through a tiny vent cut near the roof, and the fire responds with a quiet flicker. The air within the shelter is warmer, but still crisp. You pull the nearest hide across your shoulders and feel its softness press gently against your skin. It makes you wonder how many nights families spent here, gathered close, sharing warmth through stories, songs, and the simple comfort of one another's presence. Some anthropologists believe winter nights were when much of a community's storytelling happened, shaping memory, teaching values, and keeping fear at bay. You close your eyes for a moment, listening. Outside, the wind sighs along the bones, brushing them with a soft, whistling edge. The sound deepens as it passes through the curved ribs, turning the shelter into a natural instrument. You understand now why some ancient groups might have believed that spirits spoke through the winter winds. The shelter hums faintly, as if telling its own story. You open your eyes again and crawl a little closer to the central hearth. The coals glow like slow beating hearts. Beside them lies a stack of fuel, small chunks of dried dung, twisted bundles of moss, even a few splintered pieces of bone. Burnable resources were always precious in landscapes where trees rarely grew. Firekeepers had to be creative. Tests on ancient hearth residues often reveal mixtures of surprising materials used to keep flames alive. You reach out and warm your palms over the coals. Your fingers tingle as the warmth sinks into them. You try to imagine the daily routine of those who lived here. Someone waking before dawn to check the embers. Someone else preparing hides for the next layer of insulation. Hunters returning with heavy bundles of meat and new bones for construction or repair. Children learning to recognize each creak of the shelter. Parents whispering hopes that winter would be merciful. A sound outside breaks the rhythm of your thoughts. A soft crunch, then another. You freeze, listening. The crunch grows louder, more deliberate. Something moves just outside the entrance. A shadow passes across the vent, opening above your head. You reach for a stone tool lying near the hearth, not out of fear, but caution. The sound pauses. The creature outside sniffs the air slowly. You hold your breath. Then the shadow shifts away, and the footsteps drift off into the snow, likely a curious wolf or a cautious reindeer drawn by the faint scent of smoke. Encounters like this would have been common. Hunters stayed alert not only for prey, but also for predators drawn to the warmth and smell of food. You lower the tool and let the tension leave your shoulders. You take a slow, deep breath and rise to your knees. The air inside the shelter feels safe again. You push the hide flap aside and step outside, leaving the warm glow behind. The night meets you with a cold embrace, but after resting in the shelter's quiet, you feel steadier, stronger. The sky above has brightened slightly with moonlight, turning the landscape silver. You look back at the shelter. Its mammoth ribs curve upward like protective arms, holding a small pocket of life in a world shaped by ice. You imagine more shelters scattered across the plains, each one glowing faintly, holding families through long winters. The bones remain long after the people move on, weathering, leaning, and collapsing over centuries until they become part of the land again. You pull your cloak tighter and begin to walk, heading toward the next rise of snow ahead. Somewhere beyond it lies another mystery of this ancient cold world, waiting for you to step inside its frozen story. You leave the bone shelter behind, watching its curved ribs fade slowly into the pale shimmer of moonlight. As you climb the next rise, the world becomes astonishingly quiet again, a quiet so complete that it feels like the snow itself is holding its breath. You pause at the crest, listening. There is nothing at first. Then, faintly, you hear something carried on the wind, not words, not calls, sounds, soft ones, strange ones, the kinds of noises that float differently through frozen air. You descend the slope and enter a broad stretch of tundra where the snow has settled into smooth, gently rolling waves. Your boots sink slightly with every step, releasing tiny puffs of powdered crystals that drift lazily behind you. The stillness is soothing at first, almost surreal. It feels like walking through a dream, painted only in whites and muted blues. Then you hear it again, a distant, low groan. It rumbles across the plain like a heavy sigh from the earth itself. You stop, turning your head, unsure if the sound came from the land, the wind, or some creature wandering unseen. Sound travels farther in cold air, often taking on strange qualities as it moves. Scientists have long observed that frigid environments can bend sound waves, making noises seem closer or farther than they truly are. You feel that idea settle in your mind as you wait for the groan to return. It does, softer this time, as if moving away. You continue walking, your steps slow and deliberate. Each crunch echoes far more loudly than seems possible. The air is so cold and clean that even your heartbeat sounds amplified inside your chest. You take a deep breath and exhale slowly. The cloud drifts upward, shimmering faintly, then dissolves almost instantly. Ahead, a cluster of low ridges appears, breaking the flatness of the terrain. As you approach, you realize they are not hills but wind-shaped formations. The snow rises and falls in patterns like frozen dunes, sculpted by storms you did not witness but can almost feel lingering in the contours. These shapes create pockets where sound seems to collect and bounce. You stop between two of these ridges and listen carefully. The wind passes overhead in a soft whisper, but down here the air stays still. In the quiet, even the shift of your clothing sounds loud. You kneel and press your palm gently against the snow. It feels solid, as if the cold has locked every crystal into place. Then another sound slips across the plain. Not a groan this time, a rhythmic clicking, faint but distinct, like stones tapping together in the distance. You straighten, eyes scanning the shadows. Nothing moves. The clicking continues for a moment, then fades abruptly. Some researchers studying polar environments have noted that temperature shifts can cause deep layers of ice to crack in rhythmic pulses. The land gives these tiny movements a voice. You imagine ancient people listening to these clicks, trying to interpret them as messages or warnings. You continue onward, climbing a gentle rise between the snow ridges. The elevation gives you a broader view of the tundra, and suddenly the world feels larger again. The plain stretches far, the moonlight turning every surface into a silver glow. You tilt your head back to take in the sky. The stars look impossibly bright, as if someone polished them for this night alone. As you walk, the snow begins to crunch differently beneath your feet. The texture shifts. You step on a patch that feels hollow underneath. You pause, testing it. The snow dips slightly, then holds. You brush away the loose powder with your glove and reveal a thin crust of ice hiding a small cavity. It is a frozen den, abandoned now. Early predators and burrowing animals often dug shelters beneath the snow to escape the worst winds. When the animals moved on, the empty dens remained like ghostly footprints in the land. You lean over the small opening. Moonlight glints off the icy walls inside. A faint smell lingers, earthy and sharp. You imagine wolves huddling inside long ago, their breaths rising in slow clouds as they listened for prey moving miles away. Wolves adapted beautifully to the Ice Age, traveling in packs across immense distances, their howls echoing across snowfields like signals in a frozen wilderness. You stand again and step away from the den. The silence returns quickly, wrapping around you like a heavy cloak. Yet silence here is never simple. There is always something moving at the edge of perception. A rustle, a creak, a faint vibration. The tundra is like a massive instrument, shaped by frost and wind, constantly creating subtle music. Then it happens. A sound cuts sharply through the air, a long, low howl rising from somewhere far off. It trembles slightly, wavering near the end. You feel it settle into your chest. The howl is followed by a shorter one, then another, echoing faintly, a pack communicating across the vast plain. These howls travelled incredibly far in such cold, allowing wolves to coordinate movements across wide stretches of land. Hunters of the Ice Age listened closely to these night songs, learning when predators were near and when they moved away. You stay still, listening until the howls fade into a soft hum carried by the wind. A moment passes, then another. The silence returns with an almost reverent stillness. You continue walking. The night feels different now, not empty but filled with unseen life. Creatures breathe, travel, hunt, or rest somewhere beyond your view. The snow beneath you is a blanket layered with countless stories. Each print or mark a reminder that survival in the Ice Age was a full-time conversation between people, animals, and the land itself. Ahead on the tundra, you notice another peculiar shape, a cluster of dark sticks protruding from the snow. As you move closer, you realize they are not sticks at all, but the remains of an ancient fire pit. The wood has long decayed, leaving behind only fragments and a scattering of charcoal sealed in frozen soil. Excavations have shown that camps like this often served as temporary hunting posts. Hunters would wait in silence, scanning the horizon for mammoths, bison, or reindeer moving through the region. You crouch beside the old fire pit and sift gently through the frozen soil. You find a tiny stone flake, still sharp along one edge, a discarded piece from tool making, left behind by hands long gone. The flake is cold against your glove, but holds a certain warmth of memory. Evidence like this has helped researchers track ancient migration routes across continents. You imagine the people who sat here, wrapped in furs, listening to the night just as you are now. A faint thump interrupts your thoughts. You straighten quickly and turn. Another thump. A slow, rhythmic beat. It takes you a moment to understand. Something large is moving in the distance. You narrow your eyes, scanning the pale horizon. A shadow shifts. Another. Then the outline becomes clear. A herd of prehistoric bison moves slowly across the plain, their heavy bodies pushing through the snow with purposeful strides. Their breaths rise like small clouds. Their humps sway with each step. These animals traveled in groups for protection, grazing on tough grasses buried beneath frost. Many Ice Age cultures relied on bison when mammoths were scarce, developing specialized hunting strategies that took advantage of terrain and wind direction. You watch the herd, captivated by the slow rhythm of their movements. The sound of their hooves carries through the cold air with surprising clarity, a steady drumming that feels almost ceremonial. They move across your field of vision, then fade into darker ground where moonlight cannot reach. When the last one disappears, the tundra grows still again. The quiet feels richer now, filled with remnants of distant footsteps and fading howls. You inhale deeply, letting the cold settle once more into your lungs. You exhale, your breath drifting upward in a pale cloud. Then you begin walking toward the next rise in the land, ready for whatever sound, shadow, or secret the frozen night intends to share next. You continue across the tundra, letting the silence fold around you once more. The snow feels different now, softer in some places, firmer in others. The landscape begins to dip into a long valley where the wind barely touches the ground, and a strange heaviness settles in the air. You breathe in and notice a faint smell riding on the stillness. Something oily, something dense. It makes you pause. You take another breath, slower this time, and the scent grows clearer. Food. Not the kind you would crave, not the warm sweetness of baked bread, or the familiar comfort of broth. This is the heavy, fatty aroma of Ice Age meals. Ancient hunters depended entirely on what they could gather, trap, or hunt in landscapes too frozen to grow crops. Their diet was rich in proteins and lipids, the only reliable energy source when the cold pulled heat from the body faster than it could be replaced. As you walk deeper into the valley, you see faint shapes in the snow, a discarded bone, a chunk of frozen fat left behind by scavengers, small clues that a recent kill might have taken place. The sight triggers a quiet unease, but also a strange curiosity. Eating in the Ice Age was not a matter of preference. It was survival. Every part of an animal had value. You descend the slope further, and eventually spot a shallow depression where stones have been arranged into a ring. The fire is gone, but inside the ring you see charred bits of marrow, burnt sinew, and melted fat frozen into the rocks. Someone cooked here recently. The residue clings to the stones, as if the fire still remembers the hands that fed it. You crouch beside the ring and brush your glove gently across one blackened rock. The surface crumbles slightly. You recognize what it was used for: boiling water with melted snow. Early groups often cooked stews in animal stomachs or hide bags heated with hot stones. The result was a thick, oily broth that provided enough calories to sustain hunters throughout brutal winter days. You stand again, letting the cold air sting your cheeks. As you continue walking, you begin to picture the types of meals early humans ate. Thick slices of frozen meat, shaved off with stone blades. Fat rendered from huge animals like mammoths, bison, and prehistoric horses. Dried strips of sinew chewed slowly to warm the jaw and body. There was no room for delicacy. Meals were fuel. A fact often mentioned in dietary research comes to mind. Humans living in glacial environments needed tremendous calorie intake to maintain body heat. Some estimates suggest that an active hunter might have required twice the energy of someone living in a temperate climate today. This meant meals were not only heavy but frequent, taken whenever opportunity allowed. You stop as you spot something unusual half buried in the snow. A leather pouch, stiff with frost. You kneel and open the flap carefully. Inside you find chunks of preserved fat, pale and waxy, still intact after days or weeks in the cold. You lift one piece gently. It feels solid, almost like carved candle wax. Early humans considered fat the most valuable part of a kill. Without it, even protein-rich diets could lead to malnutrition. Fat provided warmth, endurance, and essential nutrients. You slide the pouch back into the snow and rise once more, continuing through the valley. The air grows heavier with scent as you go. It is not unpleasant exactly, but strong in a way that makes your throat tighten. You soon discover the source. A carcass lies partially covered by drifted snow, the remains of what looks like a prehistoric horse. The ribs are exposed on one side, their curved shapes reaching upward like pale fingers. Some meat has been stripped away cleanly, suggesting tools rather than teeth. Other sections are torn by predators or scavengers. The kill is recent enough that the body has not yet fully frozen solid. You step closer, careful not to disturb anything. The smell intensifies, a thick combination of iron, fat, and cold earth. You feel the air grow slightly warmer just above the exposed organs, though you know the heat is faint and fading fast. Ancient hunters would have descended on a carcass like this with practiced efficiency, stripping meat into large slabs, melting fat with hot stones, and storing every edible piece before scavengers arrived. You picture them here now, cutting through hide with stone blades, scraping membranes, separating tendons, and packing portions into hide bags. Nothing wasted. Even bones would be cracked open later for their rich marrow. Some studies show that marrow was one of the earliest consistent food sources across Ice Age cultures, prized for its high energy content and relatively easy extraction. You step back from the carcass and look around the valley. Snow has been disturbed in multiple directions. Deep prints show where hunters approached. Lighter ones trace the paths of predators. You see long, straight tracks from wolves. Wider, staggered prints from a cave lion or another large hunter. The valley became a meeting point for life and death, drawn together by the promise of a meal. You keep walking, leaving the remains behind. The valley begins to narrow, funneling you into a corridor of drifting snow. The wind whistles faintly overhead but cannot reach you down here. The quiet grows sharper, more intimate, and soon you hear new sounds. Crunching, rustling. Someone or something is nearby. You move slowly, your steps careful and light. You reach a bend in the valley and peer around it. A small group of ancient humans kneels around a low fire. Their backs are to you, and their furs glow faintly in the firelight. You freeze, not wanting to startle them. They sit quietly, working with practiced hands. One person scrapes fat from a large bone, adding it to a pot made of hide suspended over the flames. Another sorts through strips of meat, selecting the best pieces to dry for later. A child nibbles on something small and pale, possibly a piece of dried marrow or rendered fat. You stay hidden, just observing. The fire crackles softly. The smell from the pot grows stronger, thick and almost sweet. The steam rises in slow spirals, carrying warmth that you can feel even from a distance. Their faces are calm. They work without speaking, as if their tasks are so familiar that words are unnecessary. In their movements you see a rhythm shaped by generations of survival in this frozen world. You watch them cut the meat into long strips. They hang the pieces from a simple wooden frame to dry slowly in the cold air. Foods preserved like this could last for many months. When softened with hot water or eaten as is, they provided steady energy through relentless winters. One of the hunters stirs the pot, and the smell changes again, becoming richer. This stew likely contains fat, bits of meat, bone fragments, and snow melted into thick broth. It was not meant for comfort or taste. It was meant to keep hearts pumping, lungs working, and bodies warm enough to hunt again the next day. You imagine sitting with them, taking a bowl of the hot mixture into your cold hands. You imagine blowing on the surface, then tasting something unfamiliar but deeply nourishing, something that warms your throat instantly. In an age of scarcity, such a meal was a blessing. You take a quiet step back, letting the hunters remain undisturbed. They belong to this world in a way you never truly will. You turn and begin climbing out of the valley, your breath rising in slow clouds. At the ridge above, you pause and look back. The fire glows softly, and the figures continue their work without noticing you. Their meal will sustain them through the next night, the next hunt, the next storm. You turn toward the open plain ahead, ready to face the next part of the frozen world, your imagination still filled with the heavy smells and survival flavors of Ice Age food. You leave the valley of cooking fires behind, climbing steadily until the hills open into a wide, frozen stretch that gleams faintly under the pale moonlight. The air grows colder as you walk, but this cold feels different. It is sharper, cleaner, and strangely still. You inhale gently and notice a faint metallic scent, the kind that often hangs above frozen rivers. The terrain ahead dips into a long, winding channel where the snow lies thinner, packed tightly over ice that hides beneath the surface. You pause at the edge of this channel and study it carefully. A frozen river. You can almost feel its presence before you see it fully. Rivers in the Ice Age were unpredictable. In winter they became long, glassy pathways that tempted travelers with shortcuts, yet they concealed fractures, thin patches, and hollow spaces where rushing water continued to move beneath the surface. One careless step could break through. You crouch, brushing your glove gently across the snow. Beneath your touch, you feel a firmness that is different from land. It responds with a slight vibration, as if the ice remembers the movement of water below. You stand again and step onto the surface, placing your weight carefully. It holds, but the sound that echoes upward is unsettling. A deep, muted thud, like distant thunder trapped underground. You continue forward slowly. Each step sends a faint tremor across the ice, and the sound trails behind you. Your breath drifts upward in steady puffs. The river stretches before you, a pale ribbon winding between low, snowy banks. You can see faint animal tracks crossing here and there. Hoof prints, paw prints, even a trail of small hopping dots likely left by an Arctic hare. The animals crossed this place with confidence. You, however, feel every ounce of caution. The moonlight glints off a patch where the snow has blown away, exposing a smooth sheet of clear ice. You kneel beside it and peer down. To your surprise, the ice is nearly transparent. Beneath it, frozen ripples and faint currents appear like painted patterns captured in time. In some places, dark shapes hint at stones or branches trapped below. In others, air bubbles lie suspended in strange, swirling formations. This frozen river preserves a moment that once flowed freely. A quiet crack interrupts your thoughts. Sharp, thin, slicing across the silence like the flick of a blade. Your heart jumps. You freeze, holding your breath. The crack echoes for a moment, then fades. You exhale slowly, reminding yourself that ice often makes such sounds when temperatures shift. Even so, the noise commands respect. Travelers in the Ice Age knew the rhythms of frozen rivers, listening for the subtle difference between harmless surface cracking and the dangerous groan of bending sheets. You continue forward, placing each foot where the snow appears thickest. Soft snow often means hidden weaknesses, but here it can also indicate a less exposed surface. You step lightly, keeping your strides short and deliberate. A gust of wind sweeps across the river, carrying with it a faint singing tone as it skims the ice. The sound is eerie, like the breath of some unseen creature calling from below. You hear another sound, a deep, hollow boom far beneath your feet. You stop instantly. The boom reverberates upward, then travels down the river. It fades quickly, leaving behind only silence. This is the river shifting. The flow beneath is likely still active, pushing against the ice despite the cold. Movements like this often created dangerous conditions. Some groups learned to test the ice with long spears or wooden poles, tapping ahead before stepping. A moment later, you spot something strange near the bank, a patch of frost that looks almost sculpted, standing upright in delicate needle-like formations. You step closer and examine it. These tiny spears of ice form when intense cold draws moisture upward from cracks in the surface. They glitter like tiny glass towers, sparkling under the moon. You brush your glove against one cluster. The needles shatter instantly, collapsing into a whisper of frost. You continue along the river until you reach a wider area where the ice looks unusually smooth. You approach it slowly, checking its surface. This section likely froze later than the rest. The sheen looks almost too perfect. You dig your heel into the snow near the edge and test the ice with the tip of your boot. It flexes slightly, giving off a faint groan. You step back immediately. This river is teaching you something important. Movement is patience. Movement is listening. You walk toward a narrower section where the snow is deeper and the ice feels more reliable. As you cross, you notice something half buried under the surface. A long, dark branch. No, not a branch. A spear. Its wooden shaft is trapped beneath a thin layer of ice, the stone tip pointing toward the far bank. You kneel beside it, your breath forming a small cloud as you examine the artifact. Someone dropped this here during a crossing, perhaps long ago, or perhaps only days before you arrived. It represents a story you will never fully know. You stand again and continue along the river, feeling the cold tighten around your ankles. The ice beneath your boots shifts subtly, each micro movement sending tiny pulses of sound into the air. Your ears tune to them, learning the language of frozen water. The river becomes a vast sheet of music, each step creating a note, each gust of wind brushing a new sound from the surface. After several careful minutes, you reach a spot where the river bends sharply. The snow gathers thickly here, piled by storms into smooth rolling drifts. You climb one drift and look down at the ice below. Near the bend lies a cluster of rocks, their tops poking through the snow. Around them, the ice is thicker, safer, anchored by the stone's presence. You descend and step across this section, feeling the firm reassurance beneath your weight. On the far side of the river, the ground rises gradually into a sheltered clearing free from harsh wind. You step off the ice and feel solid earth beneath your feet again. Relief washes through your chest. You breathe deeply, letting the air fill your lungs without the fear of cracking ice beneath you. You turn back for a moment and look at the frozen river. Its long, pale body reflects the moonlight in a shimmering ribbon. It feels alive, despite its frozen surface. You imagine early humans crossing rivers like this, carrying children wrapped in fur, balancing meat-laden sleds, or guiding dogs that padded ahead with natural instinct. Some communities used frozen rivers as winter highways, traveling faster on ice than through deep snow. You feel grateful for the crossing, for the ice that held, for the quiet knowledge the river offered you. Then you turn toward the sheltering rise ahead, ready to follow the path into more stable ground where the night feels just a little less perilous. You leave the frozen river behind, stepping gratefully onto firmer ground, where snow packs more tightly and no hidden water stirs beneath your feet. The terrain rises into rolling mounds, the kind shaped by endless winter storms that dragged snow into long flowing drifts. As you climb the nearest slope, you notice something subtle yet unmistakable: the weight of your clothing. It presses down on your shoulders, tugs at your steps, and reminds you with every movement that surviving in this world requires wearing half of it on your back. You slow for a moment, adjusting your layers. The fur-lined cloak wrapped around you feels heavy, thick with accumulated frost. The inner layers of hide cling to your arms and legs like stiff armor. Early humans dealt with this weight every hour of winter, moving through a world that demanded clothing as essential as air. Without these layers, your breath would freeze inside your chest. Without them, you would not last the hour. You lift your hand and brush away a dusting of frost that has gathered along your sleeve. The hide beneath is rough but dependable, stitched with sinew that resists tearing even in extreme cold. Archaeologists often describe Ice Age clothing as surprisingly sophisticated. Multiple layers, overlapping seams to block wind, reinforced stitching around joints, fur turned inward for warmth and outward for water resistance. What you wear now would be considered ingenious for its time. You shift your stance and continue moving, though your steps feel slower under the weight. The clothing shapes the way your body behaves. Every bend of your knee pushes against thick material. Every swing of your arm meets the resistance of hide grown stiff in the cold. These garments did more than protect. They defined posture, gait, even the rhythm of a journey. You imagine hunters trudging through snow like this, leaning forward under loads of supplies, with their clothing dictating how far they could travel before resting. A gust of wind crosses the ridge, but the layers shield your skin so effectively that you feel only a muted pressure. You pull your hood tighter around your face, adjusting the fur-lined edge. It traps your breath slightly, causing warm air to gather around your cheeks. In a moment like this, you understand why many Ice Age hoods extended far forward, to protect the face from freezing winds that could strip skin raw within minutes. You crouch beside a shallow slope where the snow has been blown aside, revealing patches of frozen earth. A few discarded fragments lie scattered there, pieces of hide worn thin by long use, a broken needle carved from bone, a scrap of sinew that once held clothing seams together. These remnants tell a quiet story. Clothing was not merely worn, it was repaired constantly, stitched, patched, layered, and improved again and again. Some finds show more patches than original material, proving that garments often outlasted the animals they came from. You rise again and continue along the slope. The weight of your clothing grows more noticeable. Sweat forms beneath your layers, though the cold steals it instantly. Managing temperature in the Ice Age required constant adjustment. Remove too many layers, and the cold could slip into your bones. Keep too many layers and sweat could soak the hides, freezing and turning your own clothing against you. Early humans balanced this carefully, learning through necessity how to vent heat without exposing skin. As you walk, you notice a cluster of stones arranged in a rough circle ahead. When you reach it, you realize it is a rest site, a place where travelers once stopped to remove or adjust layers, perhaps sharing warmth or tending to frostbitten fingers. You sit on one of the stones and untie the leather straps that secure part of your leg coverings. The moment you loosen them, cold air rushes in. Your legs prickle at the sudden chill. You retighten the straps quickly, understanding why people rarely exposed anything unless absolutely necessary. You stretch your shoulders, rolling them under the weight of your cloak. The garment feels like a shield, reassuring but demanding. You lift a corner of it and examine the inner fur. The strands are thick and slightly curled, likely from reindeer or bison. Such hides were prized for their insulation. In colder regions, groups sometimes layered 2 or 3 furs together, sewing them into heavy garments that transformed the wearer into a walking mound of warmth. You move on, climbing a ridge where the terrain opens into a narrow pass. As you approach the top, the wind picks up again. It catches your cloak, pulling at it like invisible hands. You lean forward, using the weight of your clothing as a counterbalance. In this moment you appreciate how weight, though exhausting, can also anchor you against the wind. Light clothing would have left you vulnerable to gusts strong enough to topple you. At the crest, you pause to look across the landscape. Moonlight reflects off snow-packed hills, turning them into pale ripples across the world. You can almost see the path of ancient migrations. Lines of travelers bundled in heavy hides, each footstep a careful placement in terrain that punished haste. Clothing made these journeys possible, allowing people to cross territories where skin alone had no chance. You descend the ridge and find a low sheltered alcove formed by overlapping boulders. You step inside and brush snow from your shoulders. Here, where the wind cannot reach, your clothing immediately feels warmer. You sit on a flat stone and gently tug off your outer mitts. The inner gloves beneath are thin but surprisingly warm. Early humans sometimes made layered gloves with fur packed between hide sheets, trapping heat while allowing some dexterity. You hold your hands near your face and breathe warm air over your fingers. You study the stitching of the gloves more carefully. Each seam is tight, almost invisible, suggesting a skilled hand. In some Ice Age sites, researchers have found needles with eyes so small that threading them must have required exquisite precision. Clothing was not merely functional. It was crafted with care, shaped by people who depended on every stitch for survival. You slip the mitts back on and rise. The alcove feels safe, but you know you cannot stay. You step out and continue along the narrow trail ahead. The snow crunches beneath you, but the sound is muffled by the layers that wrap your legs. You listen to the faint swish of hide brushing against hide, a rhythm that would have accompanied every journey through the Ice Age. The clothing becomes your soundtrack, reminder and companion. Soon you notice something else. The weight is no longer merely burden. It feels familiar, almost comforting. You have adapted. Your steps flow more easily. Your body accepts the extra mass as part of itself. Perhaps this is what made Ice Age people so resilient. The clothing became an extension of their endurance. You reach the end of the pass and step onto a wider plain where the wind has settled into gentle drifts. You pause and lift your hood slightly to let a cool breath touch your face. The cold bites with its usual precision, but your layers hold firm, protecting you, insulating you, shaping how you experience this frozen world. You take one more breath, let it drift upward in a pale cloud, and begin walking again, the weight of your clothing moving with you through the vast, ancient night. You continue across the plain, feeling the weight of your clothing settle into an easy rhythm. The wind softens, the sky clears, and the silence deepens into something vast. Ahead, the land rises gently, and you notice a faint green glow beginning to appear along the horizon. At first it looks like a blur, a thin mist floating above the snow. Then you climb a little higher, and the glow brightens, stretching upward like a curtain of light slowly unfurling across the dark canvas of the sky. You stop walking. The cold air hovers still around you, and then the heavens move. Graceful bands of green shimmer and ripple above, forming long ribbons that twist, bend, and drift like silk caught in a gentle current. Higher up, faint streaks of purple begin to entwine themselves with the green, turning the sky into a shifting tapestry of colour. You let out a slow breath as the first wave of light sweeps overhead. It billows in wide arcs, gliding silently from one edge of the horizon to the other. The northern lights. You stand motionless, entranced by the glow. Many Ice Age travellers witnessed displays like this, though their interpretations were surely different. Their myths were shaped by a sky that kept changing shape after sunset. Some viewed these lights as torches carried by spirits. Others imagined them as living rivers in the sky, flowing parallel to those on the ground. The lights felt close enough to touch, close enough to whisper to, close enough to dream into being. Tonight, they feel close to you too. You lift your face to the sky and feel the faint warmth of your own breath drifting upward. The lights flicker in soft waves, painting faint reflections across the snow. The ground becomes a pale mirror that captures every movement above, so that at times you feel as if you are walking inside the sky rather than beneath it. A cold breeze brushes lightly against your cheek. The lights intensify in response, as if stirred by the wind. You watch a bright band of green ripple across the stars like a fast-moving tide. The top of the arc glows white for a moment before dissolving into violet mist. The movement is utterly silent, yet it feels loud in emotion, like the sky is speaking through color rather than sound. You take a slow step forward, your boots sinking softly. The glow deepens, casting gentle shadows across the snow. You glance down and see your own silhouette outlined in faint green. The effect is surreal, almost magical, and it makes you understand why so many ancient cultures associated these lights with otherworldly forces. You walk closer to a higher ridge to get a better view. The snow crunches gently beneath your feet. As you climb, the sky opens wider. Now the lights surge upward in tall columns that shimmer like rising smoke. They shift from soft green to brilliant lime, then to a pale violet that tinges the edges of the clouds. The stars fade slightly under the glow, but their presence remains, scattered like jewels behind a moving veil. You sit on a patch of snow, letting your weight settle. The cold presses through your clothing, but the beauty above distracts you enough to ignore it. For a few minutes, you simply breathe and watch. Suddenly, a new form appears. Not a wave this time, but a swirling spiral of light, coiling slowly across the sky like an enormous cosmic wheel. It turns without sound, its edges shimmering with delicate colors. Such displays sometimes appear unexpectedly, and even modern observers struggle to predict their patterns. You imagine Ice Age families gathering outside their shelters to watch this same phenomenon, their breath forming clouds as they murmured questions or stories. You can almost hear those voices now, whispering imaginatively about whether the lights signaled changes in weather, shifts in herds, or messages from ancestors. The sky continues to dance. A long, soft band sweeps overhead with graceful slowness. It does not flicker now, but flows like liquid, stretching across the entire sky in a wide arc. You lie back on the snow to see it better. Your breath rises in slow clouds that blend with the night, and the snow beneath you feels firm, holding your body steady while the sky drifts and shimmers above. You let yourself imagine what early groups believed during nights like these. Some findings from symbolic artifacts suggest that celestial events held deep meaning for them. Patterns carved into mammoth ivory, or etched into stone hint at attempts to map the sky, to connect earthly cycles with the heavens. In the Ice Age, the sky was more than a backdrop. It was an active presence. You watch another burst of light ripple across the horizon. The colors brighten, reflecting across your cheeks and flickering in your eyes. You feel small in the best way, wrapped in an ancient world painted with moving color. As you sit up again, you notice the snow around you changing subtly. Tiny crystals catch the shifting glow, creating miniature galaxies beneath your knees. Each crystal seems to shine with its own faint hue, green or purple or white, depending on how the sky bends above. It feels as if the lights have scattered themselves across the ground, turning the landscape into an extension of the heavens. A faint sound reaches your ears. You stop and listen. It is not the wind, it is something sharper, a long, eerie crack slicing through the distance. Perhaps ice shifting on a far lake, the pressure releasing with a noise that echoes across the plain. The aurora continues overhead, unbothered by the restless world below. The crack fades. Silence returns. A new ribbon of light unfolds above you, sweeping slowly across the sky. You watch it with calm eyes. The movement feels gentler now, softer in rhythm. You sense that the display is beginning to ebb, but not yet ending. A few more waves shimmer, less intense but still beautiful. You feel as though you are being lulled by the motion, soothed by the soft blend of colors. As the lights grow dimmer, you rise slowly, brushing snow from your cloak. The The glow still lingers along the horizon, a pale reminder of the brilliance that filled the sky only moments ago. You take a deep breath, feeling the cold settle comfortably into your lungs this time. You walk forward again, continuing your journey across the frozen plain. The aurora fades behind you, but the memory of its light remains, warming you in a way no fire could. You feel as if the sky has shared something with you, something ancient, gentle, and strangely reassuring. The night around you deepens into a calm blue shadow, and your steps carry you toward whatever the frozen world intends to reveal next. You walk on beneath the fading glow of the aurora, letting the last green wisps disappear behind a low ridge. The plain ahead feels quieter now, as if the sky has tucked itself in after its own shimmering performance. You breathe slowly, your exhale drifting upward like a soft smoke plume. The cold settles deeper around you, but the stillness feels welcoming rather than harsh. As you descend a gentle slope, you begin to notice shapes across the snow, not random patches or drifting shadows, but deliberate impressions, tracks, some large, some small, each one pressed into the surface with clarity that only frigid temperatures can preserve. You step closer to the nearest set. They are massive prints, wide and rounded, with deeper impressions at the front. The scent of cold earth rises faintly from the depression. You brush a gloved hand along the edges, fresh, not more than a few hours old. You straighten, following the direction they lead, and then you see it. At the far edge of the plain stands a creature you never expected to encounter so suddenly. A woolly rhinoceros, its immense body covered in a thick coat of bristling hair that sways slightly in the wind. Its horn curves forward in a long, intimidating sweep, frosted near the tip where snowflakes cling. The animal lowers its head slowly, scraping the snow with powerful strokes. Underneath the snow lies coarse grass and frozen lichen, the only winter food available to creatures this large. You stay still, careful not to disturb it. The rhino snorts, sending a burst of warm mist into the air. Its ears twitch as it searches for more food. Despite its size, it moves with surprising delicacy. The snow parts beneath its hooves in soft sprays. You take one quiet step backward, keeping a respectful distance. These rhinos were known for their strength and temper. Hunters approached them with extreme caution, using strategies that avoided close combat. The woolly rhino moves slowly across the plain, unaware of you. You watch it for a long moment before continuing your trek. As you walk, you notice more signs of Ice Age life. A series of small, narrow prints appear beside your path. Their pattern is precise, evenly spaced, likely left by an Arctic fox moving quickly across the snow. The little creature probably followed the scent trails of larger animals, hoping to scavenge scraps left behind. You keep following the tracks until they diverge. Some lead toward a frozen ridge, others vanish into drifts shaped by recent wind. And then, another set catches your attention. These prints are odd. Not quite paw prints, not quite hoof marks. Wider toward the front and clustered closely together. You crouch, inspecting them. These belong to a giant sloth. You imagine the slow, lumbering creature making its way across the plain, its massive claws digging into the snow with each deliberate step. Though not common in all glacial regions, certain species roamed cold environments and left behind tracks that puzzled early humans. Some groups even attributed these unusual footprints to mythical beasts. You run your hand over one print and picture the sloth's immense, shaggy form moving patiently through the snow, leaving the land marked with strange symbols. You continue on, letting the trail guide you toward a narrow hollow where multiple tracks intersect. It is a meeting place of animal paths. Here a mammoth's heavy tread mixes with the pointed prints of reindeer. Here the delicate steps of a lynx cross the deeper impressions of a musk ox. The snow becomes a layered record of the land's visitors, each set of prints a fragment of a much larger story. The air shifts again, carrying a faint warmth that surprises you momentarily. You look around, searching for its source. Then you see the reason. Steam rises from a patch of exposed ground at the center of the hollow, where geothermal heat leaks from the earth. You step closer carefully, feeling the snow become slushier under your boots. When you kneel and place your hand above the steaming patch, you can feel a gentle warmth radiating upward. Some Ice Age groups used such areas as natural shelters during particularly harsh nights. These small thermal pockets provided relief when cold threatened to overwhelm them. You sit beside the warm patch and rest for a moment. The contrast between the heat rising from the ground and the cold brushing your back feels strangely peaceful. You close your eyes briefly, imagining families huddled near such spots, holding their children close while snow swept across the land outside. The warmth would have felt like a miracle in nights when temperatures dropped lower than any modern winter. After a while, you rise and continue down the hollow. The tracks grow more numerous here, overlapping in chaotic patterns. You pause as you notice something pressed deep into the snow near a rock embedded in ice. A print unlike the others. Human. Your breath catches slightly. The impression is shallow but recognizable. Toes, heel, arch. Someone passed through here barefoot or with very thin footwear in dangerously cold conditions. You kneel beside it, running your glove lightly along its edges. You wonder about the story behind it. A moment of desperation? A quick movement from a shelter to gather fuel? A silent crossing during a night hunt? You rise slowly, scanning the horizon. No one appears. Only the quiet world watches you. You follow the human print for several meters until it merges with another set. These belong to a reindeer. You imagine the person following the animal, tracking it across the plains, hoping for a successful hunt that would feed their group for days. The reindeer tracks change shape subtly where it leapt over a low drift. The person's tracks follow more slowly, each step careful and calculated. Then the tracks disappear under a patch of drifted snow. The trail ends here, lost to the shifting landscape. You exhale softly and continue moving. Moments later you spot another group of prints. These are unmistakably from a cave bear. The prints are wide and heavy, pressed deep into the snow. You follow them from a safe distance, imagining the creature's lumbering walk, its massive paws flattening the ground beneath it. Though cave bears often hibernated through winter, some emerged unexpectedly, leaving tracks like these. Early humans respected their strength and avoided conflict unless absolutely necessary. The wind picks up gently, carrying faint sounds from far away, clattering, scraping, and a soft crackling. You descend into a shallow basin where a series of tall ice formations rise from the ground. These formations were shaped by repeated freezing of meltwater, forming towers and pillars that resemble pale sculptures. When the wind passes through them, the ice emits soft tones, almost musical. You stand among them, listening to the gentle chiming that echoes through the basin. This sound would have fascinated early travelers. Some believed such ice towers were markers of sacred places. Others simply recognized them as natural wonders shaped by the land's rhythm. The towers gleam under the moonlight, their surfaces dotted with tiny crystals that sparkle like distant stars. You touch one gently. It feels smooth, yet brittle, like glass that could shatter at the slightest force. As you move between the pillars, you notice a sudden shift in shadows. You stop. Something is moving behind one of the larger formations. You step carefully around it. A steppe lion stands there, watching you quietly. Its fur is sleek, thickened by the cold. Its eyes reflect moonlight with a soft amber glow. The lion does not growl or posture. It simply observes you, head tilted slightly. You feel your heart beat faster, but you hold yourself very still. The steppe lion was one of the apex predators of this age, a creature strong enough to challenge almost anything that crossed its path. Yet this one seems curious rather than aggressive. After a few breaths, the lion flicks its tail once and turns away, padding silently between the ice pillars. Its footsteps leave soft impressions in the snow. You watch it disappear without sound, feeling the weight of the encounter linger in your chest. You exhale slowly and begin walking again, stepping carefully around the shimmering ice towers. The tracks, the animals, the shifting lights, all of them weave together into a living tapestry that reveals what the Ice Age truly was. Not just cold, but full of movement, presence, and breathtaking life. You step out of the basin, leaving the echoes behind, and continue into the vastness ahead, ready to meet the next mystery that waits in the frozen dark. You move out of the basin of shimmering ice pillars and onto firmer ground, where the snow thins enough for patches of earth to show through in dark, uneven shapes. The terrain feels different under your boots now, less like drifting powder and more like a hard surface carved by time. You notice clusters of stones jutting from the ground at odd angles, their edges sharp and icy. Some of the stones look intentionally arranged. Others appear scattered by ancient forces. Either way, you sense that you are stepping into a place where hands once worked the land with purpose. You crouch near one of the stones and run your gloved fingers across its surface. The texture is familiar, smooth in some places, rough in others, with tiny flake scars that mark where someone chipped away at it long ago. A tool site. You lift the stone gently. Its shape is unmistakable. A blade core, the leftover center from which smaller blades were struck. Tool-making in the Ice Age required a level of skill that rivaled artistry. Each blow had to be precise, the angle just right, the force calculated carefully. A single mistake could crack the stone the wrong way and waste valuable material. You stand slowly, imagining the people who gathered here, shapes hunched around a small fire, hands steady despite the cold, tapping stone against stone. They created knives, spear points, scrapers, and delicate blades thin as a thumbnail. Such tools made the difference between life and death. They cut hides, processed meat, shaped wood, carved bone, and prepared shelters. You can almost hear the brittle clink of stone striking stone in the quiet air. You begin to follow the scattered stones, noticing how they form a subtle trail across the ground. Each fragment holds a story. Here a broken scraper, there a flake with a razor-sharp edge. You picture a hunter testing each piece before placing it in a hide pouch. You picture a mother sharpening a tool for cleaning skins. You picture children watching quietly, absorbing every movement, preparing for the day when they would shape tools of their own. Along the trail, you notice a deer bone partly buried in the snow. You brush aside the powder and lift the bone. Its surface is carved with dozens of thin, even grooves, each one carefully placed. The grooves run parallel along one side and curve slightly near the end. These marks were created on purpose, not from butchering but from crafting. Early tool makers often carved bones into points, awls, barbed hooks, or needles. You slide your fingers across the grooves and imagine the maker repeating each stroke until the bone took its new shape. You continue walking and soon come upon a cluster of objects around a shallow pit. At first you assume it is another tool site. Then you kneel beside it and realize something different. This was a workshop, a place where multiple people worked at once. Several flint cores lie half buried, along with a few finished blades. One blade, perfectly shaped, still glints faintly in the moonlight. You hold it up and examine its edges. The sharp line where light meets shadow runs clean and uninterrupted. Even after so many seasons, it retains an elegance that makes you appreciate the craft behind it. You set the blade down carefully and sit on a snow-covered log half hidden near the pit. The log is old, weathered beyond recognition, but it tells you something important. Wood, though rare, was used whenever available. Some groups travelled long distances to gather driftwood or uprooted shrubs for tool handles. They attached stone blades using sinew, resin, or rawhide straps. The result was a tool that could withstand harsh conditions and repeated use. You lift your gaze and notice something carved into a boulder near the workshop. Lines, crosshatches, a long curve, maybe a simple map, maybe a record of successful hunts, maybe a teaching guide for young tool makers. Researchers still discuss the meanings behind such markings. Some believe they were practical guides, Others think they carried symbolic meaning that related to seasons, migrations, or social rituals. Whatever the purpose, the markings remind you that these people were not only surviving, they were thinking, planning, and shaping knowledge. You step closer to the boulder, tracing one long line with the tip of your glove. The line bends slightly near the end, as if meant to mimic the curve of a river or horizon. Or perhaps the maker simply liked the shape. You let the idea linger as you return to the workshop pit. A gust of wind sweeps across the plain, scattering loose flakes along the ground. As the wind passes, you catch the faint scent of stone dust, a dry mineral smell left behind by countless flakes chipped away here. You imagine the air once filled with that scent, mingled with smoke from nearby fires, and the earthy smell of animal hides stretched across wooden frames. A peculiar detail comes to your mind. In certain Ice Age sites, archaeologists have discovered small piles of brightly coloured stones used specifically for tool-making rituals or teaching sessions. These stones were not always local. Some were carried across long distances, traded between groups, or collected for their unusual hues. The idea that tool-making sometimes held ceremonial significance adds depth to the scene before you. You imagine an elder selecting a particularly beautiful stone to demonstrate a new technique or to mark a moment of achievement. You rise from the log and walk toward the far end of the workshop area. Here the ground dips slightly, forming a shallow trough where snow collects in soft, rolling shapes. At the bottom lies a long, flat stone splashed with patches of reddish colour. You kneel beside it and scrape the surface gently. Pigment. Natural iron oxide mixed with fat or water to create paint. Early humans used pigments not only for body decoration, but also for marking tools, improving grip, and sealing cracks. This stone was likely a mixing platform, a place where colour was prepared. You imagine someone dipping a fingertip into the pigment and tracing lines along the handle of a spear to honour a hunt or identify the maker. These small aesthetic touches reveal something important. They cared not only about practicality, but also about identity, memory, and beauty. As you stand again, you see another artifact hidden beside a cluster of rocks, a half-finished spear point still attached to its flint core. You pick it up and examine its edges. The maker had begun shaping one side, but left the opposite side untouched, perhaps interrupted by an animal, perhaps stopped by an unexpected storm, perhaps called away by the group. The unfinished piece feels strangely intimate, as if you are touching a moment paused in time. You gently set it back and continue walking through the workshop. The snow crunches softly beneath your boots. Above you, the moon glows brighter now, stretching long shadows across the ground. You imagine this workshop alive with movement, sparks flying from flint, voices murmuring, children gathering flakes that could be used for smaller tasks, adults discussing which stones made the best blades. The place feels warm in memory, even if the air around you remains icy cold. As you leave the workshop behind, you notice another trail of scattered flint leading toward a small rise. You follow it, curious. At the top of the rise lies a broad stone slab, angled across the snow. On its surface are dozens of small indentation marks, tiny round pits formed by repeated tapping. This was an anvil stone, a central hub where rough stones were struck again and again to create blade cores. The repetitive impact of countless hands shaped this slab into what you see now. You place your gloved hand on the cold stone and imagine the people who stood exactly where you stand, creating the tools that shaped their survival. Their lives depended on these objects. Each tool was a promise of warmth, of food, of shelter. You feel a deep respect settle into your chest. You take one last look at the workshop, its scattered stones glowing faintly in the moonlight. Then you turn and begin walking again, ready to follow whatever the frozen world places before your path next. You leave the tool workshop behind, feeling the echo of ancient hands still lingering in the cold air. As you walk, the landscape begins to change. The open plains narrow into long, shallow corridors formed by piled snow and exposed stones. The wind softens to a steady murmur, brushing past your hood like a quiet voice guiding you